Chapter 2 3 Red Funnels and an Austria. There were dozens of us on the ship, all ages, boys and girls, and we were all up on deck for the living of Liverpool. Ghouls wheeling and crying over our heads, calling goodbye. I thought they were waving goodbye. None of us spoke. It was a grey day with drizzle in the air. The great sad cranes bowed to the ship for the docks as we steamed past. That's all I remember of England. The deck shuddered under our feet. The engines thundered, all throbbed as the great ship turned slowly and made for the open sea ahead. The mist rolling in the horizon. The nuns had told us we were off to Australia, but it might as well have been to the moon. I had no idea where Australia was. All I knew at the time was that the ship was taking me away, somewhere far over the ocean. The ship's siren sounded again and again, deafening me, even though I had my hands over my ears. When it was over, I clutched the key around my neck, the key that Kitty had given me. The key that Kitty had given me, and I promised myself and promised her I'd come back home one day. I felt in me at that moment a sadness so deep that it had never left me since. But I felt too that just so long as I had Kitty's key, it would be lucky for me, and I would be all right. I suppose we must have gone by way of the Suez Canal. I know that most of the great liners bound from Australia did in those days, but I can't say I remember it. There's a lot I do remember though, such as the tree pillar, box red funnels, the sound of the ostrich playing from the first class where they weren't allowed to go once they even played London Bridge is falling down. And I loved that because it always made me happy when I heard it. I remember mountainous waves higher than the deck of the ship, green or grey, or the deepest blue some days, schools of silvering dancing dolphins, and always, even in the stormiest weather, seabirds shimming, the waves are floating high above the funnels, and there were the wide sea all around us. Going on it seemed to me forever and ever. As wide as the sky itself, it was the wideness of it all I remember, and the stars at the night, the millions of stars. But best of all, I saw my first albatross. He flew out of a shining wave one day, came right over my head and looked down deep into my eyes. I'd never forgotten that. The ship was in a way my first home, because it was the first home I can remember. We slept to a bunk, a dozen or more of us packed to each cabin. Deep down in the bowels of the ship close the pounding rhythm of the engines. It was cramped and hot down there and creaked of diesel and damp clothes. And there were often the stench of vomit too, a lot of it mine. I was in with a lot of other lads, all of whom were older than me, some a lot older. I was in trouble almost from the start. They called me a softie because I'd rock myself to sleep at night, humming London Bridge is falling down, and because I cried sometimes. Once one of them found out I wet my bed too. They never let me forget it. They gave me a hard time, a lot of grief. They dump me with pillows, hide my clothes, hide my shoes, but sending me to Coventry with the worst, just refusing to speak to me, not even acknowledge my existence. I really hated them for that. They reserved this particular punishment for when I was at my most miserable, when I'd been sick in the cabin. Seasickness was my chef dread. It came upon me often and violently. To begin with, I'd do what everyone else seemed to do. I'd vomit over the rail if I could get there in time. It was while I was doing this one day I first met Marty. We were vomiting together side by side, caught one another's eyes, and shared each other's wretchedness. I could see in her eyes that I was just as bad for him. It helped somehow to know that was how our friendship began. Some kindly sailor came along and took pity on us both. He gave us some advice, such as, when it gets rough, he told us, you should go below, as far down as you can. It's the best place because down there you don't feel the roll of the ship so much. That's what we did, and it worked. Mostly Marty came down to my cabin, or I'd go to his. But sometimes I'd get caught out and find myself having to be sick on the cabin floor. I'd clean it up, but I couldn't clean up the smell of it. So if I'd done it in my cabin, they'd send me to the Coventry, and it was to avoid having to face them that I sought out Marty's company. More and more, I think it was because I felt safe with him. He was a fair bit older than me, about 10. He was older. 10 he was older even than the boys in my cabin, and taller too. The tallest of us all, and tall was important. I never asked him to protect me, not as such. But I knew somehow he might, as I turned out he did. We were on deck to the two of us, watching all albatross gliding over the waves like me. Marty loved albatross. When a gang of these lads from my cabin was suddenly there behind us, they were Northland lads, all of them. Sometimes I could hardly understand what they said. One of them, their ringleader, Wes Snarley, started calling me names and taunting me. I can't remember why. I was not a poxy cockney, Marty said at West for a moment. He was just walked up to him and knocked him flat. Once punched dead, he said very quietly, I'm a cockney too. They all slunk away, and after that, life got a whole lot easier for me down in the cabin. It might have just been as hot and sticky, just as ground a smell, but at least there were less left for me. All Marty's doing.